The Zeitgeist Movement Defined Excerpt, Essay 13, Post-Scarcity Trends, Capacity, and Efficiency.
The Zeitgeist Movement Defined, Essay 13, Post-Scarcity Trends, Capacity, and Efficiency, Part 1. Quote, "The world's present industrial civilization is handicapped by the coexistence of two universal, overlapping, and incompatible intellectual systems. The accumulated knowledge of the last 4 centuries of the properties and interrelationships of matter and energy, and the associated monetary culture which has evolved from folkways of prehistoric origin." End quote. M. King Hubbard. Evaluating design. Examining the surface of Earth today, a network layer of communities, industrial centers, transport routes, recreational areas, agricultural systems, and the like dominate much of the landscape. Whether intended as a total system construct or not, this result at any given point in time constitutes the appearance of a topographical design. Yet on the other hand, given that this resulting design today is actually a consequential amalgamation of mostly business dynamics, moving money around for personal or group self-interest, based around decision-making mechanisms such as profit, cost efficiency, and the prevailing logic surrounding property relationships. It could also be argued that what has manifest is actually not a design at all. Rather, it is rooted in a mechanism that has created the appearance of design ex post facto, since the structural outcome recognized was not fully anticipated as a whole prior to its construction. In other words, the technical order we see in the world today is mostly the result of financial processes that have little to no perception of larger scale structural outcomes. It is more of a proxy system, and while there are some relative exceptions, such as the placement of highways, pipelines, and the like by funded city planners who simply must take a broad physical view to be functional, even those circumstances are often working around pre-existing property claims and other forms of interference which tend to reduce design efficiency on the whole. This is an interesting observation, as once it is recognized that our society operates without a large-scale preconception of its own physical design, one might begin to realize the enormous level of unnecessary waste and technical inefficiency inherent to such a short-sighted process. To consider this more so, 2 points are worth considering. A, existing yet unapplied solutions, and B, broad conception versus spontaneous conception. A, existing yet unapplied solutions. This first point concerns the tendency of many new innovations for problem resolution to go unapplied within the current economic tradition. If further life-improving methods or technologies have not found their way into a system within a respectable amount of time, or at all, after general validation, we can rightly assume there are inefficiencies, if not deficiencies, with the very process of economic incorporation and development. In other words, this delay between proven solutions and their application in the real world gauges the ability of the socioeconomic system to adapt properly to improved methods and applications. If for some reason the social order in question is not able to incorporate such new means to further ecological balance, improve public health, solve problems, and increase prosperity, then there is likely a structural problem inherent. B, Broad conception versus spontaneous conception. Secondly, from a strictly formulaic viewpoint, direct total system considerations will always be more efficient and effective than spontaneous generation by processes blind to the final outcome or purpose. In other words, as gestured before, a basic good, such as a car, has a design that is conceived of in advance, before physical production. Once this design is decided upon, it is then followed by applying real-life materials and processes to create the actual physical product. This may seem obvious to most as a logical process, but the relevance of such preconception is often lost when it comes to larger order contexts. We have to wonder what the outcome would be if we applied the pseudo-democratic market process of bidding, buying, and selling for short-term profit, if even possible on such a scale, to the creation of high-integrity goods systems such as an airplane, computer, car, home, or the like. While today the resources, labor, and sub-component systems of these items are certainly in play in the open market, the design itself is not. The design is relegated necessarily to the discipline of science overall. It could be said that a line is intuitively drawn in this way between what is susceptible to monetary opinion and what is tangibly needed to keep some basic level of technical system integrity. Please note that this notion of design is not to be confused with subjective style interests. Design, as used here, is not an aesthetic consideration, but a technical one. Imagine hypothetically if people bid and offered for the physical design construction of a house in each tiny physical detail, ignoring scientific principles. In other words, instead of referencing the basic laws of physics and the natural science that defines the core structural integrity of any building, we let the market decide, with everyone buying and selling such premises for their personal gain, regardless of their technical understanding. Of course, such an idea is truly absurd in such abstraction, and most reading this probably can't even imagine such an irrational interplay. However, this is exactly what is occurring as a result of our economic system in many other less obvious ways. For example, on the macroeconomic scale, the global commercial network created by what is termed globalization, with its basis in cost efficiency, which among other things utilizes cheaper labor in often distant regions while wasting large amounts of energy sending resources all over the world and back, reveals this loss of efficiency as well. From the perspective of preconceived design, given the more logical possibility of localization of labor, production, and distribution in most all cases, globalization in its current form is highly inefficient compared to other possibilities. This is not to deny that globalization and this integration of international economies has generally been a productive occurrence within the evolution of economics. In that context, it has served global industrial development fairly well. However, if we step out of the box of market logic and examine how we could directly design a more technically efficient and localized set of systems within the global setting, we find that the current method is not only inferior, it is rather offensive. On the microeconomic scale, this can be exemplified with respect to the inefficiency inherent to the quality of basic good components, also due to the practice of cost efficiency and the inherent interest to produce the so-called best at the lowest cost, which quite simply does not produce the best at all. For example, a proposed schematic design of, say, a laptop computer might be reasonably efficient technically. However, if the actual materials used to generate that final good are relatively poor in quality, no matter how intelligent the overall basic design, it will incur relative weakness and will likely break down more rapidly than if the same design was also optimized to use the most appropriate materials from a technical point of view, rather than those materials decided upon as per the proxy of market efficiency. Another example is the market phenomenon of proprietary technology. While we see ostensibly an enormous amount of variety in the world today with respect to good production, a closer look shows a vast and wasteful multiplicity, along with problematic structural incompatibility between producers, components of the same good genre. In other words, competing corporations today tend to create custom systems, such as a computer system, and its required components, that are incompatible with the developments of other producers in that same good genre. Universal compatibility, or lack thereof, is yet another example that the byproduct of this market proxy game and the larger order system inefficiency and waste is enormous. This pattern is also common to a generational development of existing commercial product systems, aka models, such as when improvements are made to a given machine, unnecessarily making obsolete older components of that machine in the interest of assuring further purchases from the consumer. It is critical to note that there is no such thing as a single product in the closed system of Earth with respect to planetary resources and their use, nor are any product designs or production methods existing in a vacuum. Each good and its process of production is merely an extension of the whole of industry. Hence, the materials utilized along with designs find their true context only with respect to the whole of industry and resource management on all levels. This understanding forces the constant need to view industry, and hence economics itself, as a single system process to ensure maximum technical efficiency. So with this in mind, coupled again with the first point regarding the question of why certain realities are not put into practice, even though they are clearly doable at a given point in time, this essay will examine socially relevant technological trends and design capacities which, if applied properly, could radically transform the world into a post-scarcity, highly abundant condition that would alleviate the vast majority of the world's problems we see as commonplace today. Moreover, it is a conclusion of TZM that the current model not only disallows or too slowly incorporates new advents in efficiency due to the very nature of business and its tendency to preserve inefficiency for the sake of an establishment's profit, the very detached and segregated nature of market activity inherently ignores larger order considerations to source and solve problems or accelerate improvement. Design efficiency. If we break down the everyday complexity of our lives today, dissecting what interplay is most critical to human survival, sustainability, and prosperity, we might find three basic things: science, natural law, and resources. Science is the mechanism for discovery and validation. Natural law is the pre-existing rule set which we are continually learning about via science and necessarily adapting, while resources exist in the context of both raw earthly materials and the power of the human mind to comprehend. With respect to the development of design, these three attributes are naturally indispensable to each other. Furthermore, the term industrial design for the purposes of this essay will be used to denote the process of economic-oriented industry in all its facets, from singular good creation to the total order of the global economy in form. The history of industrial design is, in many respects, the true history of economic development, as our ever-emerging scientific understandings generate logical inference with respect to how best utilize our resources and time. The global landscape, both physical and cultural, has undergone perpetual change. In this context, the core interest of industrial design is essentially efficiency, and it could be argued that there are three central efficiency contexts related. A. Labor efficiency, B. Material efficiency, and C. System efficiency. A. Labor efficiency has a unique history. Since the early 20th century, there has been a relatively rapid transition from the dominant use of human and animal muscle as the source of labor power to the use of powered machines. This phenomenon, which is termed mechanization, was able to elevate the workforce from much strenuous toil to operate in more of a position of tool utilization. However, by the end of the 20th century, this pattern continued to advance, where such machines were not only capable of moving heavy loads and performing complex physical acts, they were also merging with computerization and degrees of artificial intelligence, AI, and hence were able to make decisions as well. In short, the accelerating trend today has proven that these modern machines are now greatly surpassing in productivity the vast majority of the actions historically held by human beings, and there appears to be no slowing down of this trend. Overall, TZM views this trend as suggesting a powerful means by which the human species can further maximize its productive ability to meet the needs of all human beings, while generating a level of human freedom never before seen, if adapted properly. B. Material efficiency is how well we utilize the raw materials of the earth. Materials science also has a unique history unto itself, with each period of time discovering new patterns and possibilities. Metallurgy, a domain of materials engineering that studies the physical and chemical behavior of metallic elements and their mixtures, was a very important development historically, enabling a vast spectrum of possibility through the creation of compounds and alloys. For example, the term Bronze Age, which was the period in Europe of around 3200 to 600 BC, is characterized by the common use of copper and its alloy bronze for many purposes. However, perhaps the most important discovery in materials science understanding, and perhaps one of the most important discoveries in human history, was the set of chemical elements that comprise all matter as we know it. Recognized by most as organized via the periodic table, 118 elements have been identified as of 2013, with about 92 known to occur naturally on Earth. In short, these chemical elements are the building blocks of everything we experience as tangible in the world around us, and each respective atom has certain properties and hence idiosyncratic applications. This knowledge, which is extremely new relative to the totality of human understanding, has not only allowed for a deeper understanding of how chemistry can work to create an incredibly vast range of materials for increasingly efficient industrial use, it has also facilitated a powerful understanding of the very nature of matter itself and prospects for manipulations at the atomic scale. Nanotechnology, which is very much in its infancy, appears quite concrete in its theoretical basis of assembling and disassembling different materials and even systems of materials, i.e., goods themselves, from the atomic level up and down. Of course, as profound as that is, the current, relatively crude state of nanotechnology applies mostly in the context of what are called smart materials, or metamaterials. As will be touched upon later in this essay, the current state and trends of materials science hold profound possibilities for the present and future. System efficiency is likely the most crucial and important of all concepts, for as abstract as it may seem, everything we know of is a system itself or an interaction of two or more systems. Perhaps the best way to express system efficiency is to consider any commonplace act and think about how that act could either reduce waste or increase productivity on any and all levels, not just within the context of the perceived singular act itself. System perspectives are rather obscure to most, since we tend to view most functions and processes within the bounds of their intended purpose only in a categorical manner. For example, when we consider a modern fitness center, aka gym, with people exercising on various machines in one location, we tend to think only of the purpose of that institution and hence how to better facilitate the health interests of those people using those machines, etc. We rarely think more broadly and propose, what if all those people pedaling and pushing and pulling had that exerted energy run into a conversion system where the building itself could be powered in whole or in part by that energy in the form of electricity? This manner of thought stands at the heart of a systems theory type worldview. Perhaps a useful way to think of this network perspective is through the synergy of nature itself. In the Earth's biosphere, minus current human interference, there is virtually no such thing as waste. Virtually everything we find in nature is deeply integrated and in balance due to the refining nature of evolution itself. This is a powerful observation, and the term biomimicry is worth mentioning in this context, as in many ways our development as a species has been to learn from the natural processes in existence already, even though we appear to have decoupled greatly in many ways. Hence, working to facilitate the most optimized integration we can, ideally reusing everything on all levels, just as nature does, should be a societal goal to ensure sustainability and efficiency. Established and potential trends. There are two broad basic trends or realities to consider in the world today. For the purposes of this essay, we will refer to them as established and potential. Established trends are the socio-economic trends in play at the time of this writing, and these, in the context of public health and ecological balance, are shown to be almost entirely negative. The potential trends, on the other hand, reveal life-improving and balance-creating possibilities that could occur if larger order social changes were made. As noted before, these two trends arguably appear to operate in a system contradiction of each other. In the essay titled Social Destabilization and Transition, an in-depth look at the current state of societal affairs will be addressed in detail. However, let it be stated that the efficiencies defined, defended, and suggested here are not done so simply to show how much better the world could be, as though what we are doing today is still okay. On the contrary, these basic observations actually demand alignment if we intend to maintain stability in our world given its current degrading patterns. With a population expected to reach over 9 billion by 2050, with reported trends of looming food, water, and energy shortages, these suggestions not only seek to improve, but to actually change course. Overall, it is the view of TZM that if these current so-called established trends persist, with the short-sighted market-based practice and all the characteristics that go along with it, human culture will not only not achieve the positive application of the potential trends expressed, increased destabilization will continue to occur. The Zeitgeist Movement defined Essay 13, Post-Scarcity Trends, Capacity, and Efficiency, Part 2. Post-Scarcity Worldview. In this section, basic statistics and trends will be presented to show how we can, as a global society, achieve a post-scarcity social system. While scarcity in absolute terms will always be with humanity to one degree or another, in this closed system of earthly resources, scarcity on the level of human needs and basic material success is no longer a viable defense of the market system's allocation methods. As a brief aside, a common defense of the price system and the market is that if any scarcity exists, it makes void any other approach. The argument goes that since not everyone can have XYZ, XYZ is scarce, and hence people need money, or have a lack thereof, to filter out who gains XYZ and who doesn't. The problem with this assumption is that it ignores how certain resources, and hence goods, have more relevance than others when it comes to public health. Comparing the scarcity of a very expensive luxury car which draws status satisfaction from its owner more than its basic purpose as a mode of transport with the scarcity of food, which is a core life requirement for health, is not legitimate in real-life terms. The former interest, while perhaps important to the ego satisfaction of the owner, who likely already has his or her basic needs met to afford such a product, is not equivalent to the latter interest of those who have little or nothing to eat and hence cannot survive. One cannot arbitrarily conflate such needs and wants as though they are simply the same in theory. Sadly, this is how the market system behaves. Likewise, with great wealth and material imbalance comes inevitable social destabilization. Virtually every large-scale public dissent and revolution we have seen in the past couple hundred years have had some economic basis, usually revolving around societal imbalance, exploitation, and class separation. The same goes for the roots of crime, terrorism, addictions, and other social problems. Virtually all of these propensities are born out of deprivation, whether absolute or relative, and this deprivation is inherent to the nature of a society based on competition and scarcity. So to simply reduce our economic reality down to mere trade, coupled with the claim that any degree of scarcity justifies the use of the market, price, and money for allocation, is to ignore the true nature of what ensures social harmony, stability, and public health. Would it seem reasonable to forego the technical ability to, say, elevate 80% of humanity to the material capacity currently held by only 10% today, simply because not everyone can own a 500-room mansion? Again, the absurdity of this objection is quite clear when a system perspective is taken with respect to what underscores true public health and social stability. That aside, below is a list of current life support realities available to the global population that have gone unharnessed due to inhibiting factors inherent to the market economy. Each point will be addressed in its own subsection. Number 1, food production. Current production methods already produce more than enough food to feed all human beings on Earth. Furthermore, current trends toward more optimized technology and agricultural methods also show a capacity to further increase production, efficiency, and nutrition quality to a state of active abundance, with minimal human labor and increasingly less energy, water, and land requirements. Number 2, clean water. Desalination and decontamination processes currently exist to such a vast degree of application that no human being, even in the present state of pollution levels, would ever need to be without clean water, regardless of where they are on Earth. Number 3, energy between geothermal, wind, solar, and hydro, coupled with system-based processes that can recapture expelled energy and reuse it directly. There is an absolute energy abundance which can provide for many times the current world's population. Number 4, material production access. The spectrum of material production from buildings to transport to common goods has experienced a powerful merging of capital goods, consumer goods, and human labor. With proper system incorporation of each genre of production, coupled with optimized regeneration processes and a total transformation from the use of property rights to a system of access rights, it is clear that all known good functions in the form of product can be utilized by 100% of humanity on a per-need basis in access abundance. Carrying capacity. However, before these 4 issues are addressed in detail, an analysis of the Earth's carrying capacity is in order. Carrying capacity is defined as the maximum equilibrium number of organisms of a particular species that can be supported indefinitely in a given environment. Speculation on the Earth's carrying capacity with respect to human beings, meaning how many people the Earth and its biosphere can support, has been a controversial subject for many centuries. For example, a 2001 United Nations report said that two-thirds of the estimates they noted at that time fell in the range of 4 billion to 16 billion, with a median of about 10 billion. However, technological change and its capacity to increase efficiency with respect to how our resources are used presents an ongoing interference in such attempts to arrive at a tangible empirical figure. The reality is that the number of people the Earth can support is highly variable and based in part on the current state of technology at a given time, and the more we progress our scientific and technical understanding, the more people we tend to be able to support with less energy and resources applied per person. Of course, this isn't to imply that within the closed system of the Earth we have some infinite capacity to reproduce. Rather, it highlights the relevance of what it means to be strategic, intelligent, and efficient with our resource use, and by extension, the industrial economic process itself. Today, there is no evidence that we are at or are closely approaching the Earth's carrying capacity. If we take into account the trends that reveal our vast potential to do more with less, coupled with a value system that clearly recognizes that we, as a species, occupy a closed Earth system with natural limitations overall, and that it is our personal responsibility to ourselves, each other, and future generations to keep an interest in balance, efficiency, and sustainability. This educational imperative suggests that a conscious, informed global culture can stabilize its reproduction rate, if need be, without external force, if this basic relationship is properly understood. Of course, much could be said about the influence of old traditional beliefs, such as religious doctrines that appear to suggest that ongoing and constant procreation is a virtue. These views, which originated in the absence of the knowledge we have today regarding our shared existence on a finite planet, will likely be overcome naturally with education. Likewise, if current regions of accelerating population growth are analyzed, it is found that those existing in deprivation and poverty are reproducing faster than those who are not in poverty. While there is some controversy as to why this pattern prevails, the correlation appears to still be accurate. This evidence suggests that increasing people's standards of living can curtail their rates of reproduction, and this furthers the social imperative to create a more equitable system of resource allocation. Food production. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, 1 out of every 8 people on Earth, nearly 1 billion people, suffer from chronic undernourishment. Almost all of these people live in developing countries, representing 15% of the population of these countries. Poverty is, needless to say, clearly linked to this phenomenon. Yet politics and business aside, world agriculture today actually produces 17% more calories per person than it did 30 years ago, despite a 70% population increase. There is enough food to provide everyone in the world with at least 2,720 kilocalories per day, which is more than enough to maintain good health for most. Therefore, the existence of such a large number of chronically hungry people in the developing world today reveals, at a minimum, that there is something fundamentally wrong with the global industrial and economic process itself, and not the Earth's carrying capacity or humanity's ability to process enough resources. According to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, we produced globally about 4 billion metric tons of food per annum. Yet due to poor practices in harvesting, storage, and transportation, as well as market and consumer wastage, it is estimated that 30 to 50% of all food produced never reaches a human stomach. Furthermore, this figure does not reflect the fact that large amounts of land, energy, fertilizers, and water have also been lost in the production of foodstuffs, which simply end up as waste. In the words of food waste researcher Valentine Thurn, the number of calories that end up in the garbage in North America and Europe would be sufficient to feed the hungry of this world 3 times over. Economically, first world waste patterns can create price increases for the global food supply due to increased demand resulting from those very waste patterns. In other words, the first world adds to the world hunger epidemic by its waste patterns on the consumer end because the resulting demand from increased waste increases price values past what is affordable for many. While there is certainly an educational imperative for the consuming world to consider the relevance of their waste patterns in the current climate, both in terms of real food waste and its effect on global prices due to increased demand because of this waste, it appears that the most effective and practical means to overcome this global deficiency is to update the system of food production itself with modern methods. This, coupled with deliberate localization of the process itself in order to reduce the vast spectrum of waste caused by inefficiencies in the current global food supply chain, would not only reduce such problems in general, it would dramatically increase productivity, product quality, and output overall. While the active use of arable land and land-based agriculture should remain ideally, of course, with more sustainable practices than we are using today, a great deal of pressure can be alleviated at this time with advanced soilless methods which require less water, less fertilizer, fewer or no pesticides, less land, and less labor. These facilities can now be built in urban city environments or even off coastlines at sea. Perhaps the most promising of all such arrangements is what is known today as vertical farming. Vertical farming has been put to test in a number of regions with extremely promising results regarding efficiency. Extrapolating these statistics coupled with parallel trend advancement, increases in efficiency of the associated mechanisms of this process, reveals that the future of abundant food production will not only, compared to the current land-based tradition, use fewer resources per unit output, cause less waste, have a reduced ecological footprint, increase food quality, and the like, it will also use less of the surface of the planet and enable types of food that were once restricted to certain climates or regions to be grown virtually anywhere in enclosed vertical systems. While approaches vary, common methods include rotating crop systems in transparent enclosures to use natural light, coupled with hydroponic, aeroponic, and or aquaponic water and nutrient servicing systems. Artificial light systems are also being used along with other means to distribute natural light, such as the use of parabolic mirror systems that can move light without electricity. Many waste-to-energy systems approaches to these structures are increasingly common, as with advanced power systems based on regenerative processes or localized sources. Between various approaches, the capacity is dramatically increased since food can be grown almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Common objections to this type of farming have mostly been concerns over its energy footprint, criticizing the use of artificial light in some arrangements as too power-intensive. However, the use of renewable energy systems such as photovoltaics, coupled with regional placement, most conducive to renewable methods such as near wave, tidal, or geothermal sources, presents plausible solutions for sustainable non-hydrocarbon-based powering. However, it is best to think about this in a comparative context. In the U.S., up to 20% of the country's fossil fuel consumption goes into the food chain, according to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, which points out that fossil fuel use by the food systems in the developed world often rivals that of automobiles. In Singapore, a vertical farm system, custom-built in a transparent enclosure, uses a closed-loop automated hydraulic system to rotate the crop in circles between sunlight and an organic nutrient treatment, costing only about $3 a month in electricity for each enclosure. This system is also reported as 10 times more productive per square foot than conventional farming, with much less water, labor, and fertilizer used as noted above. There is also no real transport cost, given all produce is distributed locally, saving more resources and energy. Overall, there is a spectrum of applications as of now, and in many cases, these pre-existing structures not intended for such work are being utilized. In Chicago, Illinois, USA, the world's largest certified organic vertical farm is in operation. While producing mostly greens for the local Chicago market, this 90,000 square foot facility uses an aquaponics system with waste from tilapia fish providing nutrients for the plants. The farm reportedly saves 90% of its water compared to conventional farming techniques and produces no agricultural runoff. Additionally, all of its waste, such as plant roots, stems, and even biodegradable packaging, is recycled in collaboration, making it a zero-waste facility. Current statistics vary with respect to the efficiency, often due to monetary-based limitations and inherent profitability concerns. As with much in the market system, promising technology finds development only if it proves competitive. Given how new these ideas are, we cannot expect to see many examples, nor can we expect to see an optimization of such methods to a high degree for measurement without market acceptance. However, we can extrapolate the realized potential of existing systems, scaling the application out as if it were incorporated in every major city in its most relatively efficient form. The following list confirms the superiority of this approach to the current traditional land-based model, not only showing a more sustainable practice, but a more productive practice, which can, in concert with existing methods, provide the entire world's population with vegetable-based nutrition many times over. Versatile. Unlike traditional farming, vertical farms can be constructed anywhere, even on water, using upward layers to multiply output capacity. I.e., a 10-story farm will produce 1/10 of a 100-story farm. This space utilization is limited mostly to architectural possibility. Likewise, the plants grown can be on demand in many ways, since region-based restrictions have been lifted, since these farms can grow virtually anything. Reduced resource use. Vertical farming uses substantially less water and pesticide and is more conducive to non-hydrocarbon-based nutrient fertilizer methods. Its energy use can vary based on application, but in its most efficient setting, it uses dramatically less energy both to power the farm itself and with respect to the now removed need for excess hydrocarbon fertilizer and oil-fueled transport, which is a heavy burden in the current farm-based process. More sustainable, less ecological damage. The current tradition of farming has been recognized as one of the most ecologically destructive processes of modern society. In the words of environmental writer Renee Cho, quote, "As of 2008, 37.7% of global land and 45% of U.S. land was used for agriculture. The encroachment of humans into wild land has resulted in the spread of infectious diseases, the loss of biodiversity, and the disruption of ecosystems. Overcultivation and poor soil management has led to the degradation of global agricultural lands. The millions of tons of toxic pesticides used each year contaminate surface waters and groundwater and endanger wildlife. Agriculture is responsible for 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions and accounts for 1/5 of U.S. fossil fuel use, mainly to run farm equipment, transport food, and produce fertilizer. As excess fertilizer washes into rivers, streams, and oceans, it can cause eutrophication. Algae blooms proliferate. When they die, they are consumed by microbes, which use up all the oxygen in the water. The result is a dead zone that kills all aquatic life. As of 2008, there were 405 dead zones around the world. More than 2/3 of the world's fresh water is used for agriculture." End quote. Post-scarcity capacity. Students at Columbia University working on vertical farm systems determined that in order to feed 50,000 people, a 30-story building the size of a New York City block would be needed. A New York City block, loosely speaking, is about 6.4 acres. If we extrapolate this into the context of the city of Los Angeles, California, USA, with a population of about 3.9 million, with a total acreage of about 318,912, it would take roughly 78 30-story, 6.4 covering land acre structures to feed the local residents. This amounts to about 0.1% of the total land area of Los Angeles to feed the population. The Earth, being about 29% land, has roughly 36,794,240,000 acres and a human population of 7.2 billion as of late 2013. If we extrapolate the same basis of a 30-story vertical farm covering 6.4 acres to feed 50,000 people, we end up needing 144,000 vertical farms, in theory, to feed the world. This amounts to 921,600 acres of land to place these farms. Given roughly 38% of all the Earth's land is currently being used for traditional agriculture, 13,981,811,200 acres, we find that we need only 0.006% of the Earth's existing farmland to meet production requirements. Now, these extrapolations are clearly theoretical, and obviously many other factors need to be taken into account with respect to placement of such farm systems and critical specifics. Also, within the 38% land use statistic, much of that land is for livestock cultivation, not just crop production. However, the raw statistics are quite incredible with respect to possible efficiency and capacity. In fact, if we were to theoretically take only crop production land alone currently being used, which is about 4,408,320,000 acres, replacing the land-based cultivation process by placing these 30-story vertical farm systems only side by side, the food output would be enough to feed 34.4 trillion. Given that we will only need to feed 9 billion by 2050, we only need to harness about 0.02% of this theoretical capacity, which it could be argued likely makes rather moot any seemingly practical objections common to the aforementioned extrapolation. As a final note, proteins which are readily available in the vegetative realm are still brought into question in the modern day with respect to interest in meat production. From a sustainability standpoint, ignoring the common moral issues and arguably inhumane practices still common to industrialized livestock cultivation, the production of meat is an environmentally unfriendly act today. According to the ILRI, livestock systems occupy about 45% of the Earth's surface. According to the FAO, livestock sector produces more greenhouse gas emissions than modern gas-consuming transport. Given that 90% of all the large fish once thriving in the ocean are gone due to overfishing as well, new solutions are needed. One such solution is aquaculture, which is the direct farming of fish, crustaceans, and the like. The direct approach, if sustainably driven, can provide farm-raised, protein-rich fish for human consumption, replacing the demand for land-based meat. Another approach is the production of in vitro meat. In vitro meat may be produced as strips of muscle fiber, which grow through the fusion of precursor cells, either embryonic stem cells or specialized satellite cells found in muscle tissue. This type of meat is usually cultured in a bioreactor. While still experimental in 2013, the world's first lab-grown burger was cooked and eaten in London. Other benefits include the reduction of livestock-sourced diseases, which is very common, along with being able to avoid certain negative health characteristics of traditional meat, such as the removal of fatty acids in production. The Zeitgeist Movement defined Essay 13, Post-Scarcity, Trends, Capacity, and Efficiency, Part 3. Clean water. given that the human body can only survive a few days without fresh water. Making this most basic resource abundantly available to all is critical. Likewise, it is the backbone of many industrial production methods, including agriculture itself. Fresh water is naturally occurring water on the Earth's surface in ice sheets, ice caps, glaciers, icebergs, bogs, ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams, and underground as groundwater in aquifers and underground streams. Of all the water on Earth, 97% of it is saline and not directly consumable. According to the World Health Organization, about 2.6 billion people, half the developing world, lack even a simple improved latrine, and 1.1 billion people have no access to any type of improved drinking source of water. As a direct consequence, 1.6 million people die every year from diarrheal diseases, including cholera, attributable to lack of access to safe drinking water and basic sanitation, and 90% of these are children under 5, mostly in developing countries. 160 million people are infected with schistosomiasis, causing tens of thousands of deaths yearly. 500 million people are at risk of trachoma, from which 146 million are threatened by blindness and 6 million are visually impaired. Intestinal helminths, ascariasis, trichuriasis, and hookworm infection are plaguing the developing world due to inadequate drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, with 13.3 million suffering from high-intensity intestinal helminths infections. There are around 1.5 million cases of clinical hepatitis A every year. According to the United Nations, by 2025, an estimated 1.8 billion people will live in areas plagued by water scarcity, with 2/3 of the world's population living in water-stressed regions. As with most all of the world's current resource problems, it is an issue of both poor management and a lack of industrial application. From the standpoint of management, the amount of water wasted in the world due to pollution, overuse, and inefficient infrastructure is enormous. About 95% of all water that enters most people's homes goes back down the drain in one shot. A systems-based solution to optimize this use is to design kitchens and bathrooms so they recapture water for different purposes. For example, the water running through a sink or shower can be made available for a toilet. Various companies have slowly put such ideas to practice recently, but overall, most infrastructures do nothing of the sort as far as reuse schemes. The same is true of large commercial buildings, which can create reuse networks throughout the whole structure, coupled with capture of rainwater for other purposes, etc. Water pollution is another problem which affects both developed and developing nations on many levels. The American Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, estimates that 850 billion gallons of untreated discharges, waste, flow into water bodies, actually contributing to over 7 million illnesses each year. The World Center for Water Management estimates that only about 10 to 12% of wastewater in Latin America is treated properly. Mexico City, for example, exports its untreated wastewater to local farmers. While the farmers value this because the water increases crop yields, the wastewater is heavily contaminated with pathogens and toxic chemicals, representing a serious health risk for both farmers and consumers of the agricultural products grown in this area. In India, major cities discharge untreated wastewater into the bodies of water that serve as their drinking water. Delhi, for example, discharges wastewater directly into the Yamuna River, the source of drinking water for some 57 million people. Solutions to this problem, in part, must address the issue of the vast inefficiency likely driven by the monetary limitations of most governments to institute proper waste systems, coupled with an industrial design imperative to include reuse system techniques to better preserve and utilize our existing resources. That aside, the most notable broad solution to compensate for these emerging problems, to facilitate not only an alleviation of the current water problems affecting over 2 billion people, but also to transcend into a condition of relative abundance of fresh water for all humans is to utilize modern A, purification, and B, desalination systems, both on the macro-industrial and micro-industrial scale. A, purification. Advancements in water purification have been accelerating rapidly with many technological variations of approach. Perhaps one of the most efficient today is what is called ultraviolet UV disinfection. This process is highly scalable, low energy, and works quickly. According to engineer Ashok Gadgil, inventor of portable UV systems, quote, in terms of energy use, 60 watts of electrical power, which is comparable to the power used in one ordinary table lamp, is enough to disinfect water at the rate of 1 ton per hour or 15 liters per minute. This much water is enough to meet the drinking water needs of a community of 2,000 people. This device Gadgil developed for rural poor areas can run off of solar panels and weighs only 15 pounds and has no toxic discharge. Of course, there is no silver bullet. While UV disinfection works very well for bacteria and viruses, it is less effective with other types of pollution, such as suspended solids, turbidity, color, or soluble organic matter. In large-scale applications, UV is often combined with more standard treatments, such as chlorine, as is the case with the world's largest UV drinking water disinfection plant in New York, which can treat 2.2 billion U.S. gallons, 8,300,000 cubic meters per day. That is 3,029,500,000 cubic meters a year. The average person in the United States uses 2,842 cubic meters a year. This includes fresh water used for industrial purposes, not just for direct drinking consumption. The global average is 1,385 cubic meters per year. China, India, and the United States are currently the largest freshwater users in the world, and the majority of that water is used in production, mainly agriculture. In fact, about 70% of all fresh water is used for agriculture globally. For the sake of pure statistical argument, ignoring the highly needed revisions towards strategic water use, reuse systems, and conservation possibilities through more advanced and efficient industrial applications, let us assess the simple question of what it would require to disinfect, assuming it was needed, all the fresh water currently being used in the world on average by the population in all contexts. Given the global average of 1,385 cubic meters and a population of 7.2 billion, we arrive at a total annual use of 9.972 trillion cubic meters. Using the New York UV plant's output capacity of roughly 3 billion cubic meters a year as a base per installation of such a plant, we find that 3,327 plants would be needed globally. The New York plant is about 3.7 acres. This means about 12,309 acres of land is needed, in theory, to facilitate a purification process of all the fresh water currently used globally by the population. Of course, needless to say, there are many other footprint factors that come into play, such as power needs coupled with the critical importance of location. However, let's put this into a larger, more thoughtful comparison. The United States military alone, with its roughly 845,441 military buildings and bases, occupies about 30 million acres of land globally. Only 0.04% of that land would be needed to disinfect the total freshwater use of the entire world, if it were even needed at scale, which it is not. B. Desalination. The realistic possibility of mass global purification of polluted fresh water aside, likely the most powerful means to assure usable, potable water is to convert directly from a saline source, namely the ocean. With a plant comprised of mostly salt water, this technique, if done properly, assures global abundance alone. The most common method of desalination used today is reverse osmosis, a process that removes water molecules from salt water, leaving salt ions in a leftover brine waste byproduct. According to the International Desalination Association, currently reverse osmosis accounts for nearly 60% of installed capacity, followed by the thermal processes, multi-stage flash (MSF) at 26% and multi-effect distillation (MED) at 8.2%. As of 2011, there were roughly 16,000 desalination plants worldwide, and the total global capacity of all plants online, e.g. in operation, was 66.5 million cubic meters per day, or approximately 17.6 billion US gallons per day. As with everything technological, many advancing methods currently considered experimental suggest a powerful increase in efficiency as the trends unfold. One such method, called capacitive desalination (CD), also known as capacitive deionization (CDI), has been shown to operate with greater energy efficiency, lower pressures, no membrane components, and it does not produce a waste discharge like conventional practices. It can also be easily scaled up simply by increasing the number of flow electrodes in the system. Overall, if we examine the existing methods in general, coupled with emerging methods, we see a general trend of increasing efficiency in both power conservation and performance. That briefly noted, the focus of this extrapolation towards a post-scarcity utilization of desalination will consider only current proven in-use methods, namely the reverse osmosis system. The Wonthaggi Desalination Plant is an advanced reversed osmosis seawater desalination plant on the Bass Coast near Wonthaggi in southern Victoria, Australia. It was completed in December 2012. It can produce conservatively about 410,000 cubic meters of desalinated water a day, 150 million cubic meters a year, while occupying about 20 hectares, about 50 acres of land. Since, as noted before, the total annual water use of the world today is about 972 billion cubic meters, this means that it would take 60,000 plants to process all potable water usage. Once again, this extreme extrapolation is to make a relative point, since we do not need to desalinate that much water in reality. However, assuming that we did need to desalinate seawater constantly to match current global use, 3 million acres of land would be needed total. Earth has about 217,490 miles of coastline, which means, loosely using the Wonthaggi model of roughly 20 hectares, roughly 50 acres, with 100 meters per hectare, or 328 feet, assuming the construction was 4 hectares deep and 5 hectares long, parallel to the coastline, the plant would take up 1,640 feet along the coast. This means, assuming 60,000 plants of the same dimension, it would take up 98,400,000 feet, or 18,636 miles of coastline, 8.5% of the world's coastline. Of course, that is a great deal of coastline, and naturally many other factors come into play when choosing an appropriate location for such a plant. Again, it is not the purpose of this extrapolation to suggest these statistics are of any other use than to gauge a broad sense of what such capacity means, in light of the water scarcity stress issues occurring today. Yet the fact is, it is clearly within the range of such application to meet the needs of people suffering from water scarcity via desalination alone, coupled with an infrastructure and distribution system to move water inland. As a final example, let's reduce this abstract extrapolation more so and apply it to a real-life circumstance. On the continent of Africa, for example, which has about 1 billion people as of 2013, roughly 345 million people lack sufficient access to potable water. If we apply the noted global average consumption rate of 1,385 cubic meters a year, seeking to provide each of those 345 million people that amount, we would need 477,825,000,000 cubic meters produced annually. Using the Wonthaggi annual capacity of 150 million cubic meters produced as the base figure, Africa would need 3,185 50-acre plants along its coastline to meet such demand, taking up about 25,158 miles of coastline in Africa. 5,223,400 feet, or 989 miles. This takes up only 3.9% of Africa's coastline. However, if we divided this number in half and used UV purification systems for one section and desalinization for the other, the desalinization process would need about 1.9% or 494 miles of coastline for desalination facilities and only about 296 acres of land for purification facilities, which is a minuscule fraction of Africa's total landmass of about 7 billion acres. This is highly doable, and obviously in this case and in all cases we would strategically maximize purification processes since it is more efficient while using desalination for the remaining demand. Such crude statistics reveal that between UV and traditional decontamination coupled with traditional desalination processes as they currently exist, even ignoring the rapid advancements occurring in both fields, which will likely have an exponentially advanced level of efficiency in the coming decades, the idea of enduring water scarcity on planet Earth is absurd. Both of these isolated extrapolations have assumed only one or the other was applied in only large-scale form, assuming there are no other existing sources of potable water. In reality, given the existing level of fresh water still available, coupled with a simple, intelligent reordering of use-reuse water network schemes to further preserve the existing capacity, coupled with both large and small-scale desalination and decontamination processes as regions require, many of which can be powered by rapidly advancing renewable energy processes as well, we have the technical capacity to bring potable water availability to absolute global abundance. Energy. Renewable energy sources are sources that are continually replenished. Such sources include energy from water, wind, solar, and geothermal. In contrast, fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas are non-renewable as they are based on Earth's stores, which show no near-term regeneration. As of early 21st century, the recognition of clean, renewable energy possibilities has been substantial. The spectrum of application, scalability, and degree of efficiency, coupled with advancing methods for energy storage and transfer, have arguably made our current, mostly hydrocarbon-based energy methods appear outdated, especially given the ongoing negative consequences of their use. Nuclear energy, while effective and considered a renewable form by some, works at very high risk given the unstable materials involved and the large-scale accidents on record have brought the safety of this form of production into question as well. In the world today, the 5 most commonly used renewable sources are hydropower via dams, solar, wind, geothermal, and biofuels. Renewable energy sources currently represent about 15% of global energy use, with hydropower accounting for 97% of this figure. Given that over 1.2 billion people are without access to electricity worldwide, coupled with the ongoing pollution and periodic crises associated with traditional non-renewable methods, the purpose of this subsection is to show how the dangerous realities associated with fossil fuels and nuclear energy are no longer needed. We can now power the world many times over with clean, renewable, relatively low-impact methods, largely localized as per the needs of a single structure, city, or industrial application. However, it is important to point out up front that there is no single solution at this time. Given that different areas of the Earth have different propensities for renewable energy, harnessing and use, application must be seen as a system or network development of a combination of mediums. That noted, narrowing down the most relevant of these abundance-producing possibilities, it is perhaps best to think of renewable energy extraction, harnessing, and use in two categories: A, large-scale/baseload, and B, small-scale and total mixed-use systems. A, large-scale/baseload. Large-scale generation, such as for baseload needs required to power a city or high-energy industrial center, includes four main mediums: A1, geothermal plants; A2, wind farms; A3, solar fields; and A4, water, ocean/hydropower. A1, geothermal. Geothermal power is energy harnessed essentially from the natural heat of the Earth's molten core, with plants usually placed around areas where the distance to large heat centers is fairly shallow. A 2006 MIT report on geothermal energy promoting an advanced extraction system called EGS found that 13,000 zettajoules of power are currently available in the Earth, with the possibility of 2,000 zettajoules being harvestable with improved technology. The total energy consumption of all the countries on the planet is about half a zettajoule, 0.55 a year. And this means thousands of years of planetary power could be harnessed in this medium alone. The MIT report also estimated that there was enough energy in hard rocks 10 kilometers below the U.S. alone to supply all the world's current needs for 30,000 years. Even with an expected 56% increase of consumption by 2040, geothermal's capacity is enormous if properly tapped. Likewise, the extraction of heat taking place from within the Earth appears quite minor in comparison to its store, making the source virtually limitless in proportion to actual human consumption. Also, since the energy is produced constantly, there are no intermittency problems, and this type of energy can be produced constantly without the need for storage. The environmental impact of geothermal is relatively very low. Iceland has been using it almost exclusively for some time, and their plants produce extremely low emissions, no carbon, when compared to hydrocarbon-based methods. Apart from some sulfur produced, small earthquakes can occur as a result of drilling techniques. This problem has been acknowledged as human-induced, and improvement in the engineering process is the solution, coupled with clear understanding of the nature of the location for drilling. As far as location, it is theoretically possible to place geothermal energy extraction plants anywhere, if the capacity to drill deep enough was there, coupled with other advancements in technology. However, today most plants need to exist near where tectonic plates meet on Earth. A geothermal map of the surface of the Earth taken by satellite can show such ideal spots very clearly based on heat emitted. These maps show possibilities near most coastlines around the world, and while most studies are ambiguous with respect to exactly how many locations could be made available, the potential recognized in general is enormous. The U.S. Department of Energy has noted that geothermal energy also uses much less land than other energy sources, including fossil fuel and currently dominant renewables. Over 30 years, the period of time commonly used to compare the life cycle impacts from different power sources, a geothermal facility uses 404 meters squared of land per gigawatt hour, while a coal facility uses 3,632 meters squared per gigawatt hour. If we were to do a basic comparison of geothermal to coal given this ratio of meters squared to gigawatt hour, we find that we could fit about 9 geothermal plants in the space of one coal plant. Likewise, it is important to note that new, more efficient methods to tap geothermal appear to be just starting with respect to possible output potential. In 2013, it was announced that a 1,000 megawatt power station was to begin construction in Ethiopia. A megawatt is a unit of power, and power capacity is expressed differently from energy capacity, which is expressed in this context of megawatts, as megawatt hours, MWH. Put another way, energy is the amount of work done, whereas power is the rate of doing work. So, for example, a generator with 1 MW capacity that operates at that capacity consistently for 1 hour will produce 1 megawatt hour of electricity. This means if a 1,000 megawatt geothermal power station operated at full capacity 24 hours a day, 7 days a year, it would produce 8,760,000 megawatt hours per year. The world's current annual usage in megawatt hours is about 153 billion, which means it would take, in abstraction, 17,465 geothermal plants to match global use. According to the World Coal Association, there are over 2,300 coal power plants in operation worldwide. Using the aforementioned plant size/capacity comparison of about 9 geothermal plants fitting into one coal plant, the space of 1,940, or 84% of the total in existence, coal plants would be needed. In theory, to contain the 17,465 geothermal plants. Also, given coal today accounts for only 41% of the world's current energy production, this theoretical extrapolation also shows how in 84% of the current space usage by coal plants alone, which only produce 41%, geothermal could supply 100% power capacity as per global use instead. All this without the pollution from coal, which has been considered one of the most polluting practices in the world, along with being likely the largest contributor to the human-made increase of CO2 in the atmosphere. Wind farms. U.S. Department of Energy studies have concluded that wind harvesting in the Great Plains states of Texas, Kansas, and North Dakota could provide enough electricity to power the entire USA. More impressively, a 2005 Stanford University study published in the Journal of Geophysical Research found that if only 20% of the wind potential on the planet was harnessed, it would cover the entire world's energy needs. In corroboration, 2 more recent studies by unrelated organizations published in 2012 calculated that with existing wind turbine technology, the Earth could produce hundreds of trillions of watts of power. This, in effect, is many more times what the world currently consumes. Wind power is perhaps one of the most simple and low-impact forms of renewable energy, and its scalability is limited only to location. Using the 9,000-acre Alta Wind Energy Center, California, as a basis, which has an active capacity of 1,320 megawatts of power, a theoretical annual output of 11,563,200 megawatt hours is possible. This means that 13,231 9,000-acre wind farms would be needed to meet the current output figure of 153 billion megawatt hours. This means 119,079,000 acres of wind-sufficient land would be required. This amounts to 0.3% of the Earth's surface that would be needed to power the world in abstraction. Once again, this is not to suggest such a thing is ideal, given what land is feasible for wind farms, along with other important factors. This is simply to give a general perspective of possibility. However, one unique reality of wind power generation is the potential of offshore harnessing. Compared to land-based wind power, offshore wind power has, on average, a much larger yield as wind speeds tend to be higher. This reality also alleviates land-based pressures, given land scarcity and regional restrictions. According to the Assessment of Offshore Wind Energy Resources for the United States, 4,150 gigawatts 4,150,000 megawatts of potential wind turbine capacity from offshore wind resources are available in the United States. Assuming this power capacity was consistent for a year, we end up with an energy conversion of 36,354,000,000 megawatt hours a year, given the United States in 2010 used 25,776 terawatt hours of energy, we find that offshore wind harvesting alone exceeds national use by about 10.6 billion megawatt hours, or 41%. Intuitively extrapolating this national level of capacity to the rest of the world's coastlines, also taking into account the aforementioned land-based only statistic research that found we can power the world many times over onshore as well, the possibilities of wind-based energy abundance is exceptionally impressive. Solar fields. The upper atmosphere of Earth receives about 1.5 times 1021 watt-hours of solar radiation annually. This vast amount of energy is more than 23,000 times that used by the human population of the planet. If humanity could capture 0.1% of the solar energy striking the Earth, we would have access to 6 times as much energy as we consume in all forms today, with almost no greenhouse gas emissions. The ability to harness this power depends on the technology and how high the percentage of radiation absorption is. Conventional photovoltaics, currently the most common form used mostly for smaller applications, use silicon as the semiconductor and exist in something of a flat cell or sheet. Concentrated photovoltaics, CPV, are generally more efficient than non-concentrated on average. However, they tend to require more direct exposure to focus the light properly. Concentrated solar power, CPS, is a large-scale approach that uses mirrors or lenses to concentrate a large area of sunlight or solar thermal energy onto a small area. Electrical power is produced when the concentrated light is converted to heat, which drives a heat engine, such as a steam turbine, connected to an electrical power generator or the like. Unlike photovoltaics, which convert directly to electricity, this technology converts to heat. Recently, large-scale storage methods have also been used to prolong access at night. A variation of CPS is STE, or solar thermal energy. The Ivanpah Solar Electric Generating System in California, USA is a 3,500-acre field with a stated annual generation of 1,079,232 megawatt hours. While Ivanpah does not use any form of storage, it serves about 140,000 homes in the region. If we were to extrapolate using Ivanpah as a basis, it would take 141,767 fields, or 496,184,500 acres, to theoretically meet current global energy use based on output. This is 1.43% of total land on Earth. Once again, this is not to suggest such a thing is practical, nor is it to ignore the radiation yield differences found on different areas of the Earth. However, deserts, which tend to be highly conducive for solar fields, while often less conducive to life support for people, are roughly 1/3 of all the land mass in the world, or about 12 billion acres. Compared to the roughly 500 million acres theoretically needed to power the world as per our extrapolation, only 4.1% of the world's desert land would be needed. Likewise, other projects similar to the Ivanpah field have been incorporating storage systems. The Solana 280 megawatt solar power plant in Arizona combines parabolic trough mirror technology with molten salt thermal storage and is able to continue outputting up to 6 hours after the sky goes dark. In general, the rate of advancement of photovoltaic, solar thermal, storage methods, and other existing and emerging technologies continue to rapidly advance, revealing that many installations seen as highly efficient today will be grossly inefficient in a decade or two, as will be addressed more so with respect to smaller scale renewable energy solutions. The use of solar power localized in the very construction of buildings and domiciles is likely to be where true future efficiency will take place. The issue is making the technology compact and efficient enough for localized per-case use. However, solar field power stations, just like geothermal and wind, have an enormous global potential in and of themselves, And there is little doubt that given proper resources and attention, these fields alone could theoretically establish an infrastructure and efficiency level to power the world alone. Water/hydro energy. Water-based renewable energy extraction could generally be said to have two broad sources: the ocean itself and river-type water flows, which use the gravitational force of falling or flowing water, usually in an inland watercourse. The latter is generally referred to in practice as hydroelectric, and as noted before, it is currently a fairly large part of the existing renewable energy infrastructure. On the other hand, the vast potential of the ocean has yet to be harnessed within a fraction of its capacity. It is not far-fetched to suggest that the intelligent harvesting of both the various mechanical movements of ocean water, coupled with exploiting the differences in heat known as ocean thermal energy conversion, or OTEC, that ocean water power couldn't also power the world alone. Given the existing fairly large-scale use of hydroelectric power, dams, already, this section will instead focus on the ocean potentials. The most pronounced sea-based potentials at this time appear to be wave, tidal, ocean current, ocean thermal, and osmotic. Waves are primarily caused by winds. Tides are primarily caused by the gravitational pull of the moon. Ocean currents are primarily caused by the rotation of the Earth. Ocean thermal results from solar heat absorbed by the surface of the ocean, and osmotic power is when fresh water and salt water meet, exploiting the difference in salt concentration. Wave. It has been found that wave power's usable global potential is about 3 terawatt, or about 26,280 terawatt hour per year, assuming constant harnessing. This is almost 20% of current global use. This amount of power has been ascertained essentially by analyzing deep water regions off continent coastlines. The theoretical power estimate has been estimated at 3.7 terawatts, with the final net estimate reduced by about 20% to compensate for various inefficiencies related to a given region, such as ice coverage. Energy output is basically determined by wave height, wave speed, wavelength, and water density. Wave farms, or the construction of wave harnessing plants off a coastline, have seen limited large-scale application at this time, with only about 6 countries sparsely applying the technology. Locations with the most potential include the western seaboard of Europe, the northern coast of the UK, and the Pacific coastlines of North and South America, Southern Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. Different locations of Earth have large differences in range. In the United Kingdom, an area with high levels of tidal activity, dozens of sites are currently noted as available, forecasting that 34% of all the UK's energy could come from tidal power alone. Globally, older studies have put tidal capacity at 1,800 terawatt hours a year. More recent studies have put the theoretical capacity, both range and stream, at 3 terawatts, assuming only a portion would be extractable. Tidal, while very predictable, is also subject to daily periods of intermittency based around tidal shifts. Assuming only 1.5 terawatt could be harnessed in a year based on advanced technology, this means about 7% of the world's power could come from tidal. Ocean current. Similar to tidal streams, ocean currents have shown great potential. These currents flow consistently in the open ocean, and various emerging technologies have been developing to harness this largely untapped medium. As with all renewables, the capacity to harness such potential is directly related to the efficiency of the technology employed. The EOEA estimates the current potential at 400 terawatt hour per year. However, there is good reason to assume this figure is outdated. Prior applications of turbine mill technologies to capture such water flows have needed an average current of 5 or 6 knots to operate efficiently, while most of the Earth's currents are slower than 3 knots. However, recent developments have revealed the possibility to harness energy from water flows of less than 2 knots. Given this potential, it has been suggested that ocean current alone could power the entire world. The Gulf Stream potential has been estimated at 13 gigawatts of actual output, assuming a 30% conversion efficiency using more traditional turbine technology. This means 13,000 megawatts, or assuming constant harnessing of the stream all year, about 113,880,000 megawatt hours a year. The United States in 2011 is estimated to have used 4.1 billion megawatt hours in electricity. This means 30% of the U.S.'s electrical consumption could be generated by the Gulf Stream alone. Once again, this is assuming the use of only established technology. Osmotic. Osmotic power, or salinity gradient power, is the energy available from the difference in the salt concentration between seawater and river water. The Norwegian Center for Renewable Energy, SFFE, estimates the global potential to be about 1,370 terawatt hours per year, with others putting it at around 1,700 terawatt hours per year, or the equivalent of half of Europe's entire energy demand. While still largely in its infancy, osmotic power harnessing through advancing technology is promising. Power plants can, in principle, be built anywhere fresh water meets seawater. They can generate power 24/7 regardless of weather conditions. Ocean thermal. The final ocean-based means for energy harnessing worth noting is ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC. Exploiting the differences in heat existing around the surface of the ocean and below, warmer surface water is used to heat a fluid, such as liquid ammonia, converting it into vapor, which expands to drive a turbine, which in turn produces electricity. The fluid is then cooled using cold water from the ocean depths, returning it into a liquid state so the process can start all over again. Of all the ocean-based energy sources, OTEC appears to have the most potential. It has been estimated that 88,000 terawatt hours per year could be generated without affecting the ocean's thermal structure. While this figure may not express total usable capacity, it implies that well over half of all current global energy consumption could be met with OTEC alone. As of 2013, most of the existing OTEC plants are experimental or very small scale. However, a few major industrial capacity projects have been set in motion, including a 10 megawatt plant off the coast of China and a 100 megawatt near Hawaii. One 100 megawatt offshore plant can theoretically power Hawaii's entire Big Island alone, meaning 186,000 people as of a 2011 census. Now, in conclusion to this subsection of ocean energy harnessing, keeping consistent with the prior categorical estimations set forward for solar, wind, and geothermal, it is worthwhile to consider the total combined, largely conservative potential of each noted medium. While this will, of course, be a crude extrapolation, since there are many complex variables, including the fact that some applications are still semi-experimental and difficult to properly assess, this general figure still helps to digest the broadest perspective of the potential of ocean renewables. Here is a list of the noted global potentials. Wave, 27,280 terawatt hours per year. Tidal, 13,140 terawatt hours per year, or 1.5 terawatts times 8,760 hours. Ocean current, 400 terawatt hours per year, old estimate with old tech. Osmotic, approximately 1,500 terawatt hours per year, average of noted statistics. Ocean thermal, 88,000 terawatt hours per year. Added together, we arrive at 130,320 terawatt hours per year, or 0.46 zettajoules a year. This is roughly 83% of current global use, 0.55 zettajoules. It is important to note that such numbers are derived in part from traditional technologies with no adjustment made for more recent improvements. If we bring traditional hydroelectric, watercourse-based, back into the equation, which according to the IEA has a potential of 16,400 terawatt hours per year, this brings the figure up to 146,720 terawatt hours per year, or 96% of current global use. Small-scale and total mixed-use systems. The prior section described the vast potentials of large-scale baseload renewable energy harnessing. Wind, solar, water/hydro, and geothermal have all shown that they are capable individually of meeting or vastly exceeding the current 0.55 zettajoule annual global energy consumption at this time. The true question is, how are such methods to be intelligently put into practice? Given the regional limitations coupled with other native issues such as intermittency, the real design initiative to create a workable combination of such means is needed. Such a systems approach is the real solution, harmonizing an optimized fraction of each of those renewables to achieve global total use abundance. For example, it is not inconceivable to imagine a series of man-made floating islands off select coastlines, which are designed to possibly harness at once wind, solar, thermal difference, wave, tidal, and ocean currents, all at the same time and in the same general area. Such energy islands would then pipe their harvest back to land for human use. Various combinations could also be applied to land-based systems as well, such as constructing wind-solar combinations to complement the fact that often wind is more present at night while solar is more present during the day. Likewise, creative ingenuity with respect to how we can intelligently combine various methods also extends to what we could consider localized energy harnessing. Smaller scale renewable methods that are conducive to single structures or small areas find the same systems logic regarding combination. These localized systems could also, if need be, connect back into the larger baseload systems as well, revealing a total mixed medium integrated network. A common example today is the use of single structure solar panels, such as for home use. While the efficiency of these panels is still improving, coupled with imposed cost limitations as per the investment/profit mechanism of the market, most people utilizing these solar power systems are only able to complement their home's electricity use rather than gain 100% utilization. For example, most systems are applied to power the home during the day while pulling power from the regional baseload grid at night. This kind of approach that seeks to maximize localized possibilities first before resorting to larger scale energy use in a system approach is the key to practical energy abundance, efficiency, and sustainability. To understand the relevance of this more thoroughly, let's expand the example of household solar array application to its possible theoretical potential. In 2011, the average annual electricity consumption for a U.S. residential utility household customer was 11,280 kilowatt hours. Given 114,800,000 households in 2010, this means 1,295 terawatt hours a year was used. Total electrical energy consumption in 2012 for the USA was 3,886,400,000 megawatt hours a year. This equates to 3,886 terawatt hours per year. This means 33% of all electric consumption occurred in people's homes, with the vast majority of that energy coming from fossil fuel power stations. If all households in the United States were able to power themselves for electricity using solar panels alone, localized energy utilization that is simply wasted at this time, the baseload stress reduction would be dramatic. Contrary to popular belief, as of 2013, this is a real possibility, given the state of solar cell efficiency and storage technology. The problem is that the current energy industry is not prepared for such efficiency, and consumer solar systems available suffer from high financial expense as a result of limited mass production, competition, and a lack of social initiative to forward advancement. It's worth stating here that the financial system and its price-oriented mechanisms exist as barriers to ubiquitous and optimized household solar development in the broad view, along with every other developing technology after a certain point of proven efficacy. While defenders of capitalism argue that the process of investment to market of an in-demand good generally reduces the cost of that good over time, making it more available to those who could not afford it before, it is forgotten that the entire process is a contrivance. If price and profit were removed from the system, focusing only on the technology and its statistical merit, both at the current time and its longer-term efficiency trends, future improvements, proper resource allocation strategies and research could be employed to bring promising technology to the population much more rapidly. In the case of solar arrays for home power generation, given the incredible capacity it has to alleviate baseload energy stress, which would today further reduce emissions and fossil fuel pollution, it is a very unfortunate circumstance this technology and its application is subject to the whims of the market. If we survey the commercial expense of an average solar array as of 2013, an average home using 11,280 kilowatt hours a month would require about 30 panels with a solar cell efficiency of about 9 to 15% and a nighttime battery system. This would cost well over $20,000. Such an expense is unaffordable for the vast majority of the world, even though the basic materials used in the traditional PV systems are simple and abundant, along with ever-increasing manufacturing ease. Likewise, it is equally as disappointing to notice how modern home construction has made little to no use of other basic, localized renewable methods that can further facilitate the real-world capacity to bring all households, not only in the USA, but in the world, to a place of energy independence. Noting the power of solar, other nearly universal applications also apply. Small wind harvesting systems and geothermal heating and cooling technology, combined with architectural design making better use of natural light and heat/cool preservation efficiency, there is a spectrum of design adjustments which could make apartments and houses not only self-sufficient but more ecologically sustainable. Coupling this with reuse designs for water preservation, along with other approaches to optimize energy/resource efficiency, it is clear that our current methods are enormously wasteful when compared to the possibilities. Extending outwards to city infrastructure, we see the same failures almost everywhere with respect to such applied systems. For example, an enormous amount of energy is used in the process of transportation. While the electric vehicle has proven viable for full global use, even though lobbying efforts and other market limitations have continued to keep its application well behind the gasoline-powered norm, many system-based methods also go unharnessed. Apart from a general necessity to reorganize urban environments to be more conducive to convenient mass transit networks, removing the need for numerous autonomous vehicles, simply reharnessing the powered movements of all transport mediums could dramatically alleviate energy pressures. A technology called piezoelectric, which is able to convert pressure and mechanical energy into electricity, is an excellent example of an energy reuse method with great potential. Existing applications have included power generation by people walking on piezo-engineered floors and sidewalks, streets which can generate power as automobiles cross over them, and train rail systems, which can also capture energy from passing train cars through pressure. Aerospace engineer Haim Abramovich has stated that a stretch of road less than a mile long, 4 lanes wide, and trafficked by about 1,000 vehicles per hour can create about 4 megawatts of power, enough to power 600 homes. Other theoretical applications extend to pretty much anything that engages pressure or action, including minor vibrations. For example, there are projects working to harness the seemingly small-scale energy production, such as texting on a cell phone in an effort to charge the phone while the phone is simply being touched or moved, applications to harvest energy from airflow from airplanes, and even an electric car that uses piezo tech in part to charge itself as it travels. If we think about the enormous mechanical energy wasted by vehicle transport modes and high-traffic walking centers, such as downtown streets, the potential of that possible regenerated energy is quite substantial. It is this type of systems thinking that is needed in order to maintain sustainability while actively pursuing a global energy abundance. Material production/access. Unlike the prior 3 subsections, which have taken only existing established methods into consideration with respect to humanity's potential to achieve an abundance of each given focus, this section will necessarily be approached differently. The problem with creating a basis for an overall material abundance extrapolation in a similar manner, taking into account general raw materials, is that the level of industrial revision needed to embrace the high degree of efficiency sought is radically different from current traditional practices. In other words, we cannot definitively extrapolate in the same way, using an existing singular process or genre technology in order to draw such a conclusion about the level of productivity possible on the whole. This is because the true abundance generating efficiency mechanism is to be found in the large-scale system orientation, taking into account the synergy present between the sustainability laws inherent to the natural world and the level of efficiency incorporated within the entire societal operation. For example, today there are over 1 billion automobiles in the world. From a narrow view, the idea of an abundance of automobiles would perhaps imply, based on the current property-oriented framework, that every human being on the planet should then own a private automobile. Put bluntly, this is the wrong perspective and an outgrowth of a non-synergetic conditioning which is common to the market system's reinforcement of property as value. From the standpoint of efficiency and sustainability, it is extremely wasteful to employ 1 automobile per person due to the fact that a person actually only drives, on average, only about 5% of the time. Otherwise, the automobile sits in parking lots, driveways, and the like. In the city of Los Angeles, California, about 1,977,803 automobiles are reported as in use as of 2009. In abstraction, based on this use time average of 5%, only 98,890 automobiles would actually be needed to meet the transport time needs of the current use demand, assuming a sharing system. In other words, in principle, only 98,890 automobiles would be needed to meet the transport needs of 1,977,803 people. Furthermore, for the sake of argument, with all other modes of public transport ignored, and with the entire population of Los Angeles, 3.9 million people, needing to be mobile for 5% a month, only 195,000 automobiles would be needed in abstraction to meet the average use time of 3.9 million people. Likewise, in the United States, in 2008, it was recorded that 236.4 million consumer vehicles were being used. With a U.S. population of 313 million, using the 5% use statistic once again, it would take 15.6 million automobiles to meet use demand. That is an 83% decrease in automobile output to meet the needs of all Americans, a 32.4% increase in use or access based on total population in theory. Of course, please note that it is well acknowledged here that such an extrapolation is merely for speculation, as obviously many other complicating factors come into play in real life that would adjust this equation greatly. The point here is to give the reader a sense of synergy. What should be pointed out is the noted increase in efficiency, where substantially fewer automobiles are needed to meet the transport needs of substantially more people, due to a system-based synergetic reorientation, in this case a car-sharing system. Again, this is not to dismiss the need for improved urban or public transport, nor does it address the importance of an automobile's design. At the root of the issue is really the subject of transportation itself, the reasons why people need such mobility, and how the environment is designed to cater for or bypass such needs. This is an enormous dynamic subject to consider. Also, let it be stated up front that no matter what real or assumed deficiencies may exist in real life, the goal of seeking post-scarcity, as both a means to relieve human suffering and as a method to adapt to truly efficient and hence sustainable practices, is without debate as a critical point of focus for an expanding society. It could be well argued that only a perverse society would willfully choose to persevere with a system that knowingly preserves scarcity for profit and establishment preservation when it is intellectually clear that such a condition is no longer needed, and hence any such related human suffering resulting is also no longer needed. As argued prior, the market economy is not just a response to a scarcity-based worldview, it is also a preserver of it. The market structurally requires a high degree of scarcity, as an abundance-focused society would eventually mean less labor for income, less turnover, and less profit on the whole. If society woke up tomorrow to a world where 50% of the human job market was automated, and where all food, energy, and basic goods could be made available without a price tag due to increased efficiency, needless to say, the job market and monetary economy as we know it would collapse. Value shift. In order to think properly about the state of our productive capacity to produce life-supporting and standard of living improving goods today, we need to first rationally separate human needs from human wants, with the priority of meeting needs first. While this distinction may appear like a controversial opinion to many, in a world where now 46% of the total wealth is owned by 1% of the population, in a world where roughly 1 billion do not get basic nutrition, in a world where 1.1 billion people live without clean drinking water, and 2.6 billion people lack adequate sanitation, in a world where 100 million people do not have shelter, in a world where 3 billion live on less than $2.50 a day, and in a world where 1.2 billion do not even have electricity, perhaps our priorities as a global civilization need to be addressed with respect to the true maintenance of what we might questionably term civilization. The truth is, this priority is not a mere poetic gesture, it is a public health requirement. The process of our physical and psychological evolution has created human needs. Not meeting these virtually empirical needs results in a destabilizing spectrum of physical, mental, and social disorders. Human wants, on the other hand, are cultural manifestations that have undergone enormous subjective change over time, revealing something of an arbitrary nature in truth. Now, this isn't to say neurotic attachments can't manifest into wants, so much so that they start to take the role of needs emotionally. However, that is still mostly a cultural condition. Sadly, again, the market does not separate needs from wants in its basic psychology, which is why scarcity arguments can be extended infinitely in defense of its existence and hence the proposed need to have a competitive, trade-based society, no matter the degree of abundance that can be achieved. This has arguably created a type of neurosis, in fact, where people assume having infinite wants, and more, is a virtue or even a driver of human progress itself. Of course, infinite possibilities are certainly a reality in many ways, as society cannot predict what technology will materialize many years down the line, as influences change and preferences change. However, infinite possibility is about vulnerability and creativity, while still being strategic and intelligent about resource management and use. This is not the same as infinite wants, which sees the human being as insatiable and indiscriminate. Therefore, part of this value shift will be undoing the sociological damage done by the psychology inherent to market-based living. A relatively high standard of living can be made available for all human beings, assuming in part a basic, responsible value shift away from our troubling patterns of wasteful, frivolous acquisition. It is important to restate that the materialism we endure as a society today is a direct response to the economic need to keep money circulating as much as possible. The role of business as we know it is either to service people's existing wants/needs or to invent them in the hope people will conform by showing new demand. A new widget put forward by the market is only as viable as the interest of others to purchase it, and the use of advertising and marketing has been very influential in creating a culture which sees ownership and acquisition as a sign of social status. This directly assists the need to keep high levels of consumerism in play, as GDP and employment are directly related to this pressure. Again, the less interest there is to consume, the less economic growth and hence less demand for jobs. This slows the existing state of a market economy and creates a systemic loss of well-being for many. It can be well argued that a culture which has decided that acquisition and expansion is the path of progress/success, promoting constant consumption and seemingly infinite economic growth, is going to eventually hit the limits of sustainability on a finite planet. In clear terms, this trend is one of disorder. Social success and progress can only mean, in part, finding balance with the habitat and the other human beings who share the habitat. Sadly, the market system's entire premise contradicts this sustainable value, as the mechanism of economic unfolding does not reward conservation and the reduction of consumption in a direct sense. Put another way, the market is a scarcity-based structural approach that paradoxically seeks increased levels of consumption to operate efficiently. So, an analysis of our material capacity to bring common goods into a post-scarcity abundance to exceed the needs of all humans on Earth cannot be discussed without also understanding necessary sustainability-oriented revisions, which will substantially reduce our resource use footprint at the same time. In short, the new industrial design approach is to deliberately increase the performance per unit of how we use our resources, seeking to always move along the route of doing more with less. Within this logic, as noted, a series of pressure alleviations toward increased sustainability and production simplification/efficiency would occur.
Hi, I'm a member of the Zeitgeist movement and I pin up flyers to spread awareness. Once I found one of my flyers covered in graffiti, which you can see. I'm not going to read it here, but you can pause this video in a moment to read it. But this video is in response to this sort of graffiti. On the subject of trading, I want to mention two statements that I really dislike. Money is obsolete. It is no longer relevant. This statement is only valid when referring to automation. At no point in history has trading or money been a valid practice, as this video will explain. So this statement is slightly misleading. The second statement is a lot more infuriating to me. The Federal Reserve and fiat currency is corrupt, but if we go back to honest barter and trading, society will be so much better. This is what I'd call delusional. The objective of this video is to explain how. First, a quote.
Competition is dangerous, socially offensive, considered right and normal because you are brought up to that value system.
When people dismiss the Zeitgeist movement, Venus Project concept, a global, open-source, sharing-based society, they say, something like this would only work on a small scale, as well as science is communism. Considering this dismissal, this video will explain how trading doesn't work on the small scale and therefore the large scale. So let's imagine we have a small group of people who generally have the same amount of property or wealth. These people are under the impression that trading their goods and services will prosper them. An advocate of trading might say, humans have always traded, always have, always will. So as they begin trading, we ask them what they think about this mode of social operation. And they say, I simply buy and sell to get my needs met, food, water, so I can live comfortably. This might be the general kind of answer that we get. But there's a phenomenon which occurs in this kind of social atmosphere that wishes to be ignored by trading advocates. My suggestion why is because they suffer from the following condition, and they are in denial of it and wish to normalize it. Like a gambling addiction, a trading addiction occurs where people don't want to maintain equilibrium and they want to gain more wealth for themselves. This is not a human nature, it's an addiction, and can also be slight brain damage where you lack empathy for your fellow humans, so you're a better competitor. To be proud of this is disgusting. People who gain a lot of wealth have to keep claiming the lie, probably while they're doing vastly unequal exchanging. There's nothing wrong with trading. Our red friend here represents a social wealth addiction. It goes around to many people to trade with, and attempts to swindle more wealth into its hands by always getting the better end of the deal. This mathematical inevitability increases absolute poverty, people who don't have their basic needs met, and relative poverty, where healthy social interaction is lost and replaced by a trading addiction. As a metaphor, it's like a casino getting built at a peaceful town, and it corrupts the local social values, like pollution corrupts a stream.
It's all been arranged just for us to get your money.
In a cry of mental illness, with public health at an abysmal level, the people irrationally chant, there's nothing wrong with trading. Yeah, sure. The science is in. The more a society is based on sharing instead of trading, the more equal it is, the healthier, and the less violent it is. This is not communist propaganda, it is the scientific reality. The skeptics are still welcome to keep saying that science is communism or Zeitgeist is a cult, but to me, that's a sign of automatic shallow responses designed to religiously defend the status quo. It's laughable that these defenses actually work. Anyway, please visit my Facebook to check out more of the activism I've done, and I hope you join the move.
With each other. Things like religion and race and gender, these things serve only to divide us and give us things to argue about, things to be confrontational about. Can we instead maybe try and find a little bit of common ground, some ideas that can bring us together, some ideas that can unite us, because it is really important that we unite and come together to try and fight the ever-increasing inequality that's going on in this world. Our system of government and finance is simply not sustainable. It is not equitable. It is not sensible. Our financial system creates nothing but debt. It enslaves individuals. It enslaves nations. It enslaves governments into perpetual inability to pay off their debts. They then have to restructure their economies as the banks tell them to do it. Political systems are creating leaders who are ever more extreme, ever more divisive. Look at Trump, look at Le Pen. The rate of inequality is increasing exponentially. Though you would have heard in January of this year, there was an article in the papers about how the richest 8 people in this world, 8 people, the richest 8 people have the same wealth as the poorest 3.7 billion people. 3.7 billion people here, 8 people here. They have the same amount of wealth. How can this be right? It's insane. Many ways that this is perpetuated. Our educational system does not prepare us to be challenging of our governments. We just listen and do as we're told. We are dumbed down to the point where our minds have become fertile soil for the myths that marketers and advertisers and propagandists plant in there. Wars are fought for blatant reasons of acquisition of resources. We go to Iraq because we want the oil. We go to Afghanistan because we want their lithium and because we want to lay pipelines there. Every single war we fought for the last 50 years has been for one reason and one reason only: gaining control of the local resources and installing permanent military presences there. Plenty of money, right? Always plenty of money around to fight wars with. Plenty of money to bail out bankers with. Plenty of money to refurbish our Trident missile system. Plenty of money for stupid high-speed 2 rail linkages. And yet, no money for toilet paper or pencils in our schools. No money to keep accident and emergency wards open. Consumerism and credit are completely out of control. Workers are exploited all over the world, being paid less than $1 a day to dig cobalt out of the ground. No protective equipment. Children as young as 4 dying so that we can have cobalt for our mobile phones. It simply cannot go on like this. It's a bloody mess. Our system is dysfunctional in many, many, many ways. Not to mention unbelievably wasteful. Our energy is still now being produced primarily by burning fossil fuels, despite the fact batteries have been around since 1800, fuel cells have been around since 1839, solar panels since 1954, windmills and water mills have been around for centuries. They've been generating power for 100 years now. We've got geothermal, we've got tidal power. These things have not even begun to be exploited yet. Why not? Because oil companies like to sell us oil, and they control our governments to the point where they are now allowed to drill in the Arctic, they're allowed to drill in Greenland, they're allowed to permanently defile the face of the earth so that we can continue to buy more oil. Of the 32 million cars currently registered in the UK, at any given moment, between 80 and 99% of those cars are simply parked on the side of the road, not doing anything, not working for us. All of that metal, all of that rubber, all of that glass, just sitting there, not serving us, blocking 2 lanes of the road with permanently parked cars where traffic cannot pass through. In a sensible world, we would have come up with some kind of car sharing scheme by now, where a dozen people jointly own one car and they figure out how to share it sensibly between them. Why have we not done this? Very simple. Changing tyres, refueling cars, insuring cars, MOTing cars, replacing, upgrading, financing new cars. All of these things are significant revenue streams for big oil and car companies. So it is in their interests to have us keep buying as many cars as possible, despite the fact it's unbelievably wasteful. Why do we still produce all of our energy, sorry, not all, but most of our electricity? In a sensible world, we will be producing it locally, using sustainable, renewable sources, not polluting the atmosphere, not creating piles of nuclear waste, which is still going to be radioactive in 100,000 years' time. Oh God, my throat is going. Excuse me, I need just a little bit of a prompt. Our farmers, another ridiculously wasteful thing. Our farmers are paid subsidies by our government to overproduce crops. They then get another payment to destroy those same crops. The overproduction of food in the Western world is more than enough to feed all the poor people in the starving parts of the world. Our pharmaceutical companies make hundreds of billions of pounds of profits every single year, and yet we still have upwards of 100,000 people die every single day on this planet, a third of them children, because of poverty and because of preventable disease. In a sensible world, surely this simply could not happen. When jobs are automated, a machine, a robot is invented to do a job that humans used to do. In our world, what that means is people lose their jobs, they don't earn money, they can't support themselves, they can't support their families. In a sensible world, if a dull, boring, dangerous job is automated, it should be a cause for celebration. People don't have to do this shitty job anymore. People have more time to spend with their families, more time to spend on leisure. But that's not how our world works. Our educational system is unchanged for 150 years. Our educational system is designed to train people to work in factories, to do those very dull, repetitive jobs that are now being automated. In the modern world, an education system should be teaching people to be creative thinkers, to be innovators, to collaborate and cooperate with each other, to come up with creative solutions to problems, rather than teaching them a bunch of dull, pointless facts which they can look up on the internet and then examining them on their ability to regurgitate those facts, and if they do a good job, they get rewarded with an A. This is not a sensible way to run an educational system. But then we do not live in a sensible world, do we? In our world, children are more concerned with outcomes than they are with learning anything. They're more concerned with popularity than they are with integrity. They're more concerned with image than they are with character, more concerned with blame than they are with responsibility. In our world, people spend more time with their phones than they do with their friends. In our world, people spend more money on servicing their debts than they do on servicing their families. In our world, 70% of arable land is given over to growing feed for cattle rather than growing food for people. We overproduce grain. Our government then pay subsidies to companies to chop down the rainforest to make room for cattle. Those cattle are then fed on grain which has been transported thousands of miles over to them. We overproduce the beef, too much beef. What do we then do with it? We grind up the beef and feed it back to the next generation of cows. That is where the BSE crisis came from. This is insanity. This is madness. So what are we supposed to do? What are we, the people, supposed to do when our systems no longer serve us and the whole financial and political system has been rigged to serve only those very, very few that exist at the top? What are we supposed to do? How can we change the world? Well, it's not an easy one, but it has to begin at grassroots level. It has to begin with us. The 200 or 300 million people at the top who are currently running things, they have no interest in changing anything. Everything's great as far as they're concerned. The 4 or 5 billion people at the bottom of the ladder, well, they're just living hand to mouth. They're just doing everything they can day to day to survive. So it's up to us. It's the middle class in the rich countries. We are the ones who are going to have to change things. How do we do that? By putting to one side all of this bullshit here, arguing about whose God is better, whether you're red or blue, whether you're a Liverpool supporter or an Everton supporter. This is madness. We need to find common ground. We need to find ways in which we can unite things that we agree on. Put to one side the stuff we disagree about. We're always going to disagree about stuff. Let's leave that and think about the things where we can actually cooperate. The internet is an amazing thing. Using the power of the internet, we can communicate ideas with each other. One community comes up with a way to solve a problem, they can instantly communicate that solution to the rest of the world. Other communities can take that solution, modify it, adapt it, improve it, send it back out there again. With people all over the world collaborating with each other, sharing ideas, sharing solutions. We can come up with our own solutions to our own problems. Turn away from the centralised control structures of government and finance, and eventually, if enough people can do this, they will become powerless, they will become obsolete, they will become irrelevant. Finally then, they may collapse and we can build something more resembling a human society out of the rubble. That's pretty much all I have to say, but I would very much welcome anyone who wants to ask anything, talk a little bit. We have leaflets here, we've got little slips of paper to websites if you want to learn more, but please start thinking about these things, because really we are talking about an extinction level event here. The reason that human beings are the dominant species on this planet right now is because of our ability to collaborate and work together and share. All of this that you see around you today, the argument, the fear, the division, the separateness, this is the beginning of the end of us as a species. If we can't figure out a way to leave our differences aside and come together, we are coming to an end as the dominant species on this planet. Thank you very much for listening. Those of you who did, I appreciate it.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
I'm only a child, yet I know we are all in this together and should act as one single world towards one single goal.
We have heard the rationales offered by the superpowers. We know who speaks for the nations, but who speaks for the human species? Who speaks for Earth?
I am talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality, where our technology allows for life in global abundance. And the choice between contender and incumbent is redundant.
Welcome to this pale blue dot in our galaxy, where we fear the finality of our own mortality, and we worry about our salary and consumption of calories, while famine and war have caused another fatality. We live in a finite world, but our need for growth is infinite. Our relationship with money is so damn intimate. We can't slow down, we want more, oh we're so into it. Intermit, it would be a sin to quit. So now the whole planet's in debt. We owe quite a tall stack, but it's literally impossible to pay it all back, because money is debt created with interest. You listening?
There's actually more money owed than exists in the whole system.
That's a pyramid scheme, not just mean individuals skimming the cream, not just smoke-filled rooms where the supremely powerful convene. It seems a systemic flaw is the theme to this meme. Today's system defines who wins and loses with competitions, and losers are created by definition. Our leaders are ruled by political ambition. Not a single one of them is a trained technician. It would be insane to listen to their claims. I'd rather use the scientific method to arrive at decisions. So pardon my sedition, but I stand by my derision, and I fight against this system with a thought for ammunition.
It's a train of thought, it's a frame of sorts, a campaign where you can't just feign support. The train of thought can't be claimed or bought. It's an idea, there's no one you can blame in court. It's a train of thought, it's not a game or sport. It pertains to humane and sustained support. Like a chain is wrought, it can be trained and taught to anyone with a brain. Let me explain in short.
I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. No political borders, no one giving you orders. It's the wealth worth giving to our sons and daughters. I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. Take care of the planet and meet everybody's needs. Make the world debt-free, just live and let be.
We can't control nature, we can only try to fit the mold. So instead of growth and jobs, let's set ourselves a new goal. A bold, high standard of living for the planet as a whole, in a sustainable way for every human soul, young and old. Let's go off your borders, time to think worldwide. No more democracy and politics, all that's been tried. Instead, we use the scientific method as a guide to arrive at decisions on how technology is applied. And if we want to provide, we can't take a resource and abuse it. We need to keep track of what we have and how fast we use it. Systems theory tells us everything in nature's connected. When we cut down too many trees, the ecosystem is affected. So in production, it makes sense to build everything to last. Planned obsolescence should be a thing of the past. And if we design fast evolving technologies to be modular, we can replace old parts with the new and more popular. To distribute our goods, the shortest distance is preferred. To transfer from there, what we can make here is absurd. Then we evaluate demand for goods and build hubs to receive them. Like a library where you check things out for as long as you need them. All of this is doable with today's technology, as long as we apply the right methodology. Cause scarcity is technically outdated, you follow me? This way we can live in abundance and global equality.
I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality, where technology allows a life in global abundance, and the choice between contender and incumbent is redundant. I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. Every time the transition is about damn time, the planet is shared by all of mankind.
Incentive is the key to understanding volition. We don't act without it, it's behind any decision. There's no human nature to behavior, just predisposition that has to be supported by the surrounding conditions. So the mission is one we should all agree to pick. No police, no prisons, no referee to trick. Build a system with no incentive for harmful behavior, cause if you remove the carrot, you don't need the stick. There would be nothing to gain from trying to mislead, mistreat or deceive. No incentive to thieve, what could you hope to achieve? Anything you need, you can get for free, and it would always be available, so no reason for greed. 10% of the population makes the system run, so instead of working 9 to 5, live your life for fun. Travel the world, raise a family, read a book, build something beautifully useful, or learn to cook. It's this generation's defining challenge, extraordinaire. It's not complicated, just a comprehensive affair. For some it's a big mouthful, for others a breath of fresh air. Don't be scared, cause it can be done, don't despair. Educate yourself on how the current system's impaired, but please do more than just make other people aware. When it comes down to it, we have two things to declare. One, we all care, and two, we all share.
That train of thought, it's a frame of sorts, a campaign where you can't just feign support. The train of thought can't be claimed or bought. It's an idea, there's no one you can blame in court. It's a train of thought, it's not a game or sport. It pertains to humane and sustained support. Like a chain is wrought, it can't be trained and taught to anyone with a brain. Let me explain in short.
I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. No political borders, no one giving you orders. It's a wealth worth giving to our sons and daughters. I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. Take care of the planet and meet everybody's need. Make the world debt-free, just live and let be. I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. Where technology allows a life in global abundance, and the choice between contender and incumbent is redundant. I'm talking about the resource-based economy, the scientific method for social equality. And because the transition is about damn time, the planet is shared by all of mankind.
I wish I could say everything's just peachy, yeah. Living life is so easy, but it's not. They got everyone believing that's just the way it is, so there's nothing to be done. And so perpetuate a culture of cutthroat competition. But despite what you might think, we got everything we need to provide for each other. And wouldn't it be nice if no one had to fight just to get a bite to eat?